Yo! What's up, y'all? It's Zems, and welcome to another reaction video. Today we're reacting to the Cloud Seeding and Mind Control Strange but 100% True Part 29 by Mr. Ballen. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you swoop down to that description box. Click on the link, go watch this video in entirety because I'm going to be pausing, stopping, and talking through the whole thing. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Zems, and welcome to the Crow's Nest. With that being said, let's get it.
Hey, what's going on? What are we doing today? We're doing, hold on a minute, hold on.
I hope he didn't change his motto, because I used to know it.
Feel the power building. Today, we're going to cover two stories that are of the strange but true variety. But
before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of this strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week.
Not 3-4 times a week. I know, but it's still pretty good. We're still doing it, okay? Still pretty good. So, if that's of interest to you, please install hidden cameras all around the Like Button's house, and then live stream those cameras to Facebook. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
The OG subscribers knows what's coming.
Okay, let's get
into it. The OG subscribers know what's coming. Mr. Ballen Dance. Let's go. Out with a bang, number 2. Wait, number 2. Should be number 1.
On the morning of June 20th, 2005, a 40-year-old man named Wong stood just inside the doorway of a little home in rural northeastern China. Outside, it was pouring rain with all this crazy thunder and lightning, and also there were these hailstones coming down the size of golf balls, smashing into everything. I mean, just the impact on the roof must have been so loud. And so as Wong was standing in the doorway, he was actually looking out in the direction of the storm because all these people were running towards him to come in the house. Wong was actually hosting a wake for a friend, and he was hosting this wake at this man's home. And all the people running up to him were all the mourners coming to pay their respects. Now, by this point, most of the mourners had already made it inside the house, and so Wong was basically just waiting for the last few stragglers to make their way inside. And so from his post at the door, Wong is watching the storm and all these people, and he also took stock of the fact that as he looked out to the big tobacco fields that kind of were all over the place in this town, that was the primary way people made money in this town, he noticed that, there was nobody out there tending the crops. And even in rainstorms, people would tend these crops because this was their livelihood, but Wong understood why nobody was out there. Yes, it was the storm, but specifically, lately there had been these crazy lightning strikes in storms like this that struck the field. And so these workers that were normally out in the fields every single day, they weren't doing that anymore. Finally, the last couple arrived and Wong greeted them and brought them inside, and then he shut the door and then began making his rounds inside the home, making sure all the guests had what they needed, and also just kind of making sure the wake was, overall a positive experience, all things considered. Now, to be clear, Wong was not a monk or a priest or even a relative of the person who was deceased. Instead, he was just kind of like the guy that emceed virtually all events in this town. So if there was weddings, he was the guy who officiated the weddings, and if there were funerals or wakes or things of that nature, also Wong was often tapped to MC that as well. He was kind of like the village elder, if you will, even though he was only 40 years old. And Wong, he really treasured the fact that he was the guy that got to do these things, and so he put a lot of time and energy into making sure they went extremely well. So on this day, as he was making his rounds, checking in with all the mourners, nobody really needed anything, and so Wong sort of felt like he didn't have a role, and he scanned around the room looking for something else he could do that would be productive, and he noticed the incense near the casket was going out. And so Wong walked over, he pulled out the extinguished incense, he got a new stick of incense, put it in, and he lit it, and then he just kind of stood over the casket and closed his eyes and began saying a silent prayer for the dead. And as Wong did this, suddenly there was this deafening roar, and then everything went black. A few seconds later, that deafening roar faded, and it was replaced by the sound of all the mourners in the house basically screaming and trying to figure out what just happened. And so as people began kind of trying to size up the situation, they saw there was all this smoke near the casket and there was all these wooden debris everywhere. And then people looked up at the ceiling and they saw there was now a pretty good sized hole that had blackened char around the edges of the hole that was kind of smoldering. And then unfortunately, once the smoke really had kind of dissipated, Wong was laying right underneath this hole in the roof and half of his head was gone. It was very clear he was deceased. And it didn't take long for mourners to figure out what had happened. Wong had unfortunately been struck by lightning. 2 days later, Wong's family held a funeral for Wong, and basically the entire village showed up for this funeral because remember, Wong was really a central member of this community.
The way I know Mr. Ballen videos, if they're holding a wake in the same place where the lightning storm happened, and if that lightning strikes the same place again, I would just condemn the building. Like, don't even use that building anymore. We got to set up somewhere else because that's incredibly like creepy to know that the lightning striker will hit the same spot again twice. But man, that goes to show you, man, like you just never know. Like some people are like, oh, I'm too scared to do this, I might die. Like you could be inside of a house and die. Like someone could fall out the sky and then knock you over the head and then kill you. So it's like, live your best life while you can because stuff like this happen. I've heard of people getting struck by lightning and like surviving, but I've never heard somebody get struck so bad by lightning that you lose half of your face. Like that's insane, the amount of power from Mother Nature.
Really big loss that he was now dead. And candidly, this only stoked the fears that everybody had about lightning strikes. I mean, this was really becoming a huge issue. But after the funeral ended and Wong had been placed into a hearse and driven off to the crematorium to be cremated, the people at this funeral who were kind of making their way out began kind of talking a little bit more candidly about what had happened to Wong. I mean, it was obvious he was struck by lightning, but in this town, there was a lot of superstition around deaths like this, when it seems like how he died is almost like an act of God. I mean, how many people get struck by lightning?
That's what I'm
Even
saying.
if you're scared of being struck by lightning, that is a very rare phenomenon, and everybody knew that. And so the mourners couldn't help but suspect that maybe Wong was not this incredible person that everybody loved. Maybe he had deep, dark secrets, and the way he was killed was like God's punishment, smiting him for the terrible things he was hiding. But nonetheless, the mourners who had just left the funeral followed tradition and actually walked over to the local crematorium where Wong would be cremated. Basically, it's the absolute final goodbye, and typically the family will stay there and wait for all the people to come by and pay their final respects. And then at that point, the family hands off their loved one in their casket to the manager of the crematorium, and the cremation process begins. And so all that happens, all the mourners go to the crematorium, they pay their final respects, and then before long, Wong's family was brought inside the crematorium with the manager, and they were placed in this quiet room to kind of wait for this process to happen. And then the manager left them and went down the hall to the furnace room where Wong's casket was waiting for him. So the furnace room inside of this crematorium is basically like this big industrial space where in the middle is this huge, intimidating metal furnace, which is actually where, the bodies are slid in and burned until they're just ash. And so picture like the biggest oven you've ever seen with a big metal rectangular door and these rails that slide directly into this furnace, and the casket is placed on those rails and then kind of fed into the furnace. They seal the door and then of course ignite the furnace, and then the cremation begins. And so the manager, who had done this many, many times, walked up to Wong's casket, which was already placed on the rails. Workers had already set it up for this process before he came in. And so the manager walks up to the casket, he opens it up, he sees Wong's body, and he confirms that Wong is just wearing a robe with a belt, and he did not have any jewelry or metal on him or anything like that, which was not allowed during the cremation process. And so feeling confident that this was all good, he shut the casket and then slid the casket into the furnace. He shut the door, the big metal door, locked it, and then started the furnace. And as soon as he hit it, the manager heard the familiar sound of gas hissing as the gas kind of filled up the inside of the space, and then the familiar whooshing sound of the flames igniting. But as the manager kind of stepped away from the front of this furnace and was kind of making his way back towards the door, he noticed there was another sound coming from inside of this furnace. It was a hissing sound, but different than the gas sound. This was something else. And then before long, the hissing got louder and louder and louder. And then finally, there was this massive explosion inside of this furnace. And so smoke is pouring out of the sides. It was unbelievable that the furnace itself even held its shape. I mean, something massive had detonated inside of this thing.
Is he cursed?
And in fact, even though that door that seals the furnace shut, even though it had not been blown off, the force of whatever detonated inside of there was so strong that the manager actually was knocked backwards from the blast. And so in a panic, he got up, and there's smoke filling the room, and there's flames kind of dancing out of the edges of this metal door in front of the furnace. And he hits the emergency stop, and the flames cut, but it's still all smoky and it's totally chaotic, and workers are rushing into the room to figure out what's going on. And the manager had no idea. This was something he had never, ever seen before. Just minutes later, firefighters arrived and basically extinguished the remaining flames that were kind of residually burning inside of the furnace and slightly outside of the furnace. Remember, this was a significant explosion, so there are cracks and breaks all over the furnace where some flames were still lit. But finally, the firefighters did extinguish all the flames, and then after it was safe to be in there, an investigation was launched as to what the heck happened in there. And so police officers went into this room and began sifting through all the debris in this room, both inside of the furnace itself and also, outside where it had cracked and things had shot off in different directions. And for a while, they found nothing. I mean, all they found were basically pieces of Wong, ash and some bone and some tissue from him. But there was nothing else that was unusual. But at some point, one of the officers did find something that was unusual. He found a piece of metal that was inside of the furnace that clearly should not have been there. Because remember, it's not allowed to have metal or jewelry or anything on the deceased when they're brought into the furnace. And considering what happened, they're like, okay, does this have something to do with the explosion? And so the officers kind of huddled around this metal and they began kind of cleaning it off to see if there was anything written on it. It's not a very big piece of metal. And eventually they had cleaned it off enough that they realized there was something written on it, and it absolutely explained what had happened here. So to understand what happened, you need to have an understanding of how the Chinese government responds to severe storms like the one that was going on the day that Wong was struck by lightning. So remember, Wong's village had all these tobacco fields all over the place, which was not only how the villagers made their living, but also China as a whole. They need these crops to be bountiful. And these huge storms that produce those golf ball sized pieces of hail, those can severely damage tobacco crops. And the Chinese government doesn't want that to happen. And so the Chinese government has set up these things called weather bureaus, which are these government agencies all across the country whose job is to try to weaken these storms. And the way they do that is very interesting. They use a chemical called silver iode that they put into the actual storm clouds. And what silver iode does is it attracts ice particles and water. And so with this chemical up in the clouds, it kind of breaks up the hail a little bit and either makes them really small. And sometimes this chemical can actually completely destroy the hail and convert it from hail to just plain old rain, which is great. So how do these weather bureaus and this silver iode have anything to do with what happened to Wong? Well, unfortunately for Wong, the way these weather bureaus in China actually get this silver iode up into the clouds is they basically take a rocket launcher and fire a literal rocket, like an explosive device, that contains this silver iode inside of it, and the rockets get fired up into the sky, into the clouds, where they detonate, and then the silver iode is kind of sprinkled all throughout the clouds. And unfortunately, on the day Wong was killed, one of those rockets were fired into the sky, and this rocket, it goes up, 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 it goes into the cloud, but it doesn't detonate. It turns around and falls straight down, and it just so happens to go straight through that roof into Wong's head, blowing off a portion of his head. And then the rocket itself got embedded in his torso and did not detonate. And then when he was wheeled off to the crematorium and slid into the furnace, and that manager turned on the furnace, that hissing sound he began hearing right before the explosion was the sound of that rocket inside of Wong's torso heating up and then finally detonating.
Bro, that's a freak ass accident. Like, that's why I was like, wait a minute, like I've heard of people getting struck by lightning, but never like their half of their face getting like torn off. I was like, what kind of lightning they got over in China? But that's insane. That didn't even sound like a good idea to me, like to be shooting that kind of stuff in the sky, especially like altering like Mother Nature or any kind of like nature in general. Like, I feel like we shouldn't be doing that, but I think they have been rumors or conspiracy theories that the governments can control the weather and stuff like that. I don't know how true that is. I'm not too deep into that stuff, but some of you guys might know. But that's insane, man. And like, it was lodged into his body. And the thing is, like, I thought they would like do autopsies and stuff like that just in case to make sure it was you died the way that they said you die, you know what I mean? Like, I thought they were gonna like cut them open and stuff like that, but then again, I don't know how it works in China, but I don't know if they just kind of like hey, he wants to be cremated, so there's no point of us doing an autopsy, you know what I'm saying? I just thought they do autopsies to make sure there was no foul play or what killed him or something like that. You can't look at it and say, oh, it was lightning. So that's crazy, man. It's unfortunate. Hopefully they change the way they do things, because that's insane for him to be sitting there and just get hit in the head with a rocket and it gets embedded in your body. And it's scary because if that thing would have blown up, it would have killed everyone in that room that was there to mourn for the Chinese person that was laying in a coffin. So the fact that it made it all the way to the cremation place and it blew up in there, like, that's double whammy. Like, that dude can't even rest in peace, bro. He got hit with the rocket and then he blown up inside there. It was like, man, what's next? You know what I mean? Hopefully there's no more that's added on to the story, because this is insane. Like, that's an outrageous way to go.
When the police officers found that little piece of metal, what they had found was actually a piece of the rocket itself. And when they cleared it off, they saw there was a serial number for that particular Weather Bureau rocket. And so that was how they were able to solve this mystery. 3 years after Wong's death, the Chinese government came out and said, yep, this is our fault, we did this. And so they compensated Wong's family 80,000 yuan, which is equal to about 12,000 US dollars. And while that's a pretty underwhelming settlement to be paying for somebody's life, what is significant that came out of this case is following Wong's death, the Chinese government altered their rockets that they fired into these clouds, and they added this feature where if for some reason the rocket goes into the cloud and doesn't detonate, it will automatically deploy a parachute and will safely fall to the ground and not detonate.
I mean, that's better, but I still don't like the rocket aspect of it. Number one, still in a slice.
On January 30th, 1989,
Domino's.
2 young men were working the afternoon lunch shift.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it, bro. Domino's is better than Pizza Hut.
You need to leave!
I'm sorry, it is. For me, it's like Domino's, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars. I haven't tried everybody's pizza. I haven't tried CC's pizza or none of that stuff. But depending on where you live, let me know what's your go-to pizza. But I'm also not a really big pizza person either. But when I do go to get pizza, I go to Domino's first. I'm a big Domino's person if I do go to pizza. I don't know why. Pizza Hut just extra grease. It's like they dip their pizza in grease or something. I don't know what it is, but my stomach starts to bubble and I get the BGs and it's a no-go. My toilet's like, no, please. I don't mess with Pizza Hut too much.
Georgia. Their names were Daryl Wilson and Sean Burnset. And most weeks, this shift that they worked together was really boring because virtually nobody came into the restaurant. But on this day, at around 11 a.m., as Daryl and Sean are kind of twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the shift to end, a man who was obviously disgruntled and very agitated stormed in the door carrying a gun, a .357 Magnum gun, so a really powerful handgun, and he aimed it straight at them. Daryl and Sean were so shocked by this that at first they didn't do anything. But then it kind of dawned on them that, oh my goodness, this guy's coming in here to rob the place. And so Daryl and Sean suddenly put their hands up and they begin saying, you know, okay, take whatever you want, take whatever you want. And the man suddenly began shouting something at them like he wanted something. And it took Daryl and Sean a second to kind of understand what he was asking for. But when they started to process the things he was saying, they kind of understood that this did not seem like a robbery. The guy was demanding that they call Tom S. Monahan so he, this guy, the guy with the gun, can talk to Tom. Now, Daryl and Sean may have known this, but probably not, because they likely didn't care. But Tom S. Monahan, at the time, was the owner of Domino's. Not like this particular restaurant in Chamblee, Georgia, but like the entire national chain. He was the actual owner of the company. And so this guy is coming in being like, you know, let me talk to the owner of Domino's. And so at some point, Daryl and Sean understood who Tom S. Monahan was. Perhaps the guy with the gun explained it, or maybe one of them did know who Tom S. Monahan was. But either way, Daryl and Sean suddenly realized, oh my goodness, this guy wants to talk to the owner. But they have no way of getting in touch with the owner of Domino's. They're just pizza cooks. They're not like connected to the C-suite. But when Daryl and Sean told the guy like, hey, we don't know how to get in touch with the literal owner of this major franchise, well, the guy didn't like that. And he got really frantic and began yelling and screaming like, you gotta do it. You gotta get Tom on the phone. And so Daryl and Sean are like, okay. And they grab the phone and they try to call their own boss because they don't know who else to call. And as they're calling their own boss, this guy fires 2 shots into the ceiling. So this is like a really high intensity situation that's escalating really quickly. But Daryl, who actually was the one on the phone, he did his best to stay calm. And when his boss got on the other line, he tried his best to explain the situation as quickly as he could, because he could tell, you know, this guy with the gun is very close to potentially shooting them. And the boss of Daryl and Sean did understand, okay, clearly there is a crisis happening at this branch. And when Daryl said, you gotta find a way to get Tom S. Monahan on the phone, like right now, well, his boss was like, I got it. And a few minutes later, Daryl's boss, who's still on the phone with him, was like, okay, I'm gonna patch you through. And then a second later, Tom S. Monahan hops on the phone and he's like, what's going on? And at this point, Daryl just handed the phone over to the guy with the gun and said, here you go, Tom's on the phone. And the man with the gun grabbed the phone, put it to his ear, and then began rattling off these totally bizarre demands. He wanted a white limousine to show up to the restaurant to be his getaway car. He wanted $10,000 in cash, and he wanted a copy of a science fiction novel about the Freemasons called The Widow's Son. And so Daryl and Sean, who are behind the counter witnessing this, they're hearing these demands, and it's clicking for them that clearly this guy is not mentally well. This is a guy who's totally unhinged, and who knows what's going to happen.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's unfortunate. Like, you just working in places like it's even happening now today. Like, some people getting shot at McDonald's for their order being wrong and stuff like that. And it's just like, hey man, I'm just giving you the bag. I didn't prepare the food. You know what I mean? So it's like people these days are so mentally insane. That's why I be trying to tell my mom, and I tell my other people, my family and friends, like, don't beep at people, bro. Just let them have it. If they want to drive crazy, don't be honking at people and pressing your horns for very long periods of time, because people will shoot you for less. People are literally dying for small things like that. If you can avoid it, just avoid it. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'd be cruising, bro. I'd be on the freeway. People be riding on my bumper and stuff like that, because I speed every now and again. You know what I'm saying? But like, I'd just be cruising. I'd be vibing, listening to music. Like, I get there when I get there. You know what I mean? I left early enough so I don't have to speed. You know what I mean? I'm not in a rush to get to work, unless you like absolutely just love your job and not speeding to get to work. You know what I mean? Like, I'm chilling. But some people want to beep and they want to cut people off and they want to swerve and they want to brake check people. Like, it's not even worth it. And you can tell dude's not mentally there, because he's like a white limousine. Why would you pick that slow ass vehicle? I would like a helicopter, or maybe like even a BMW or Mercedes or motorcycle, something, a limousine, and a copy of what? Like, bro, what you gonna do with all that? You're gonna ride in style to read the book on the way home? Like, bro, you're gonna go to jail. But I don't know, whatever it is, I'm not playing with him. Dude got 357 Magnum. That will blow your whole face in half. Probably from your nose and up will be gone, bro. That gun is powerful. Like, I've never shot one. I've seen people shoot them. That and a Desert Eagle are two guns I will never shoot, because they just look like straight menace.
For a few minutes on the phone, the gunman hung up and then told Daryl and Sean very calmly that now the three of them were just going to sit in this restaurant and wait for his demands to be met. And for the next 5.5 hours, that's what they did. Daryl, Sean, and the gunman, who just kept the gun aimed at Daryl and Sean, they just sat inside of this restaurant. And at the same time, you know, by this point, the police have been called and they're completely surrounding this restaurant. And when the gunman came into the store, because this was a very slow day, there weren't any other customers or staff inside. So it really was just Daryl, Sean, and the gunman. And so it's a total standoff. But interestingly, for Sean and Daryl, who were right there with this gunman, they started to sense that this guy was not here to hurt them. He was really after Tom S. Monahan, and over those 5.5 hours, they were just sitting there with him with his gun aimed right at them. He periodically began telling them, you know, what his gripes were with Tom S. Monahan. The gunman told Daryl and Sean that Tom was specifically targeting him, the gunman, and also Tom was secretly communicating with the gunman when the gunman didn't want to talk to him, almost like telekinesis or something. And also the gunman told them that Tom S. Monahan periodically will walk around his property at night, kind of creeping around, you know, scaring the gunman. And Daryl and Sean, you know, they're hearing these things and not believing any of it, but they were very empathetic and said, oh yeah, I can understand why that would be an issue. I can understand why you'd come in here and demand to speak to Tom S. Monahan. Yep, totally get it. And that was just kind of how the day was going. And then around 4:30 p.m., so they've been in there a long time by this point, the gunman told Daryl and Sean that he was really hungry, so they better go make him some pizzas. So Daryl and Sean just got up, they went in the back, they made 2 large everything pizzas, and after they were made, they put them in boxes and slid them across the counter to the gunman. And at this moment, Daryl and Sean knew the gunman, in order to eat, would have to put his weapon down to open up the box and get the pizza. And so the second they handed it over, without even communicating with each other, they kind of waited for the gunman to put the gun down. And he did. He put the gun down. He opened the pizza up. He grabbed a slice. And at that moment, Daryl and Sean began sprinting past him towards the door. And the gunman, who's seeing this happen, he drops the pizza, he grabs the gun, and he turns and he aims. So to really understand what's happening here, you need to understand what type of marketing Domino's, like the national franchise, was doing to advertise their product. Starting in 1985, Domino's came up with a very popular advertising campaign called the Noid. And the Noid was actually a character. It was like this weird claymation character with big sneakers and bunny ears. He was like this goofy thing that was the equivalent of McDonald's Hamburglar, but this was for pizza.
Am I tripping? I'm not like, hold on, I'm not going to say, because I've never been there. I've never been held at gunpoint, so I can't say how they were feeling. That's not what I'm about. I honestly thought in my head was kind of like, once he grabbed the pizza box, grabbed the gun, and we hold him at gunpoint, and he leaves the store or something, they ran past him, or at least knocked the gun off the counter. I don't know, but it was kind of like I don't know. If we was like both on the same wavelength, once he put the gun down, I'd have like, you know, but they were like, it only takes him like half a second to just close the pizza box and pick the gun back. I don't know, but I don't know. I hope he paints a better picture of how they were standing, or what's the length of the table or whatever they slid across to give him the pizza, because I felt like, I don't know. That's just the best way I could explain it. Like, I don't want to go down to have like, oh, I would have did this and that, because I don't know what I would have done, because I've never been in that situation. I was just thinking, my first thought was like, okay, they're going to grab the gun and point it at him now. He put it down, let's run. But it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that quick. Oh, they're running. Like, I don't know.
And what Domino's did with the Noid is they would run these ads on TV where the Noid was like this menace who was always out to disrupt pizza deliveries. Not necessarily Domino's pizza deliveries, but generally pizza deliveries. It's like the Noid's gonna destroy them, either by, freezing the pizzas on their way to the person's house, or smashing them into the ground, or causing whatever mayhem the Noid could create to stop pizzas from getting to their customers. And so Domino's kind of catchy thing was avoid the Noid with Domino's, meaning like Domino's, the chain, was the only chain capable of avoiding all the chaos that could disrupt you getting the thing you want, your pizza. And this advertising campaign was brilliant, not only because it really worked, people really liked Domino's because it did seem like they were superior, but also they were able to kind of franchise this character itself, the Noid. It became a toy you could buy, and there was talk about doing a TV show and maybe a movie around this Noid character. And Michael Jackson, like the king of pop, he put the Noid in one of his music videos. I mean, this was a really, really successful advertising campaign, but for as successful as this campaign was, it did unfortunately lead to what happened inside of this Domino's restaurant in Chamblee, Georgia. So on the day this gunman came charging in and held up the place, aiming the gun at Sean and Daryl, it would turn out the gunman's name was Kenneth Lamar Noid. And Kenneth Lamar Noid was not going into the store to get money or to steal food or to hurt, Daryl or Sean. He was there to get his revenge on Tom S. Monahan, who he looked at as the person responsible for coming up with this Noid campaign. Because Kenneth Lamar Noid was very mentally ill, and he believed the Avoid the Noid campaign was not a marketing campaign, but rather Tom S. Monahan specifically targeting Kenneth Lamar Noid, basically making him out to be this big villain. But Kenneth's plan for how to deal with this totally backfired, because in a totally ironic twist, by holding up this Domino's franchise and creating this huge standoff, he literally became like the Noid, because no pizza deliveries could be had that entire day out of that franchise. And so Kenneth Lamar Noid, in an effort to stop Tom S. Monahan from running this Noid campaign, because I'm no villain, I don't go after pizzas, I don't try to stop people from getting their pizzas. In an effort to do that, that is exactly what he did. He literally became the human version of the Noid.
That's wild.
And so after Daryl and Sean made a run for it towards the door, Kenneth did grab his gun and he did aim it at the two men, and he even fired it a couple of times, but he missed, and Daryl and Sean were totally unhurt. In fact, nobody got hurt. All that happened is Kenneth Lamar Noid looked like the Noid, and he got arrested. However, instead of going to jail, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital. As for the actual advertising campaign itself, which was very successful, Avoid the Noid, well, it would not survive this total PR nightmare, and Tom S. Monahan canceled it immediately after Kenneth Lamar Noid was taken off. So in a weird way, Kenneth actually did sort of get his revenge.
Avoid the Noid. Domino's Pizza delivers. Call now.
But yeah, man. Oh my lord. But yeah, you guys haven't already, make sure y'all go check out Mr. Ballen. He has YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. He even has a podcast. You can find all that information down on his channel. He also has a Mr. Ballen merch shop where he sells like his flannels, his legendary flannels, and I think even hat wear and some other stuff. So make sure you guys go stop by and go check that out. But some of these stories is just like crazy. It just kind of reminds you that like life is not promised to anyone, from like a lightning strike to a missile falling out of the air. Like, what are the chances of it falling down, hitting somebody in the head, and then lodging itself into somebody's chest cavity and then blowing up inside of a cremation center? You know what I mean? Like, insane. And that's just some of the ones, like that's just one of the things that we hear about like watching this video. There's countless of other things that happen daily that we do not hear about. So like I said, enjoy your life to the fullest. And then avoid the Noid was just insane. Like, what are the chances of somebody being named Noid? Like, you know what I mean? And it's been going on for so long. It was so profitable that no one would ever thought that somebody named Noid, and on top of his name being Noid, he had like, you know, a mental issue going on. So it was kind of like saying avoid him. Like, he's the person that you don't want around. Like, avoid Noid. And he takes it like, oh, that's me. They're making fun of me. When people hear my last name, they make jokes and they laugh at me and stuff like that. So, you know, in his head, it was kind of like everyone's making fun of him. Like, oh, avoid the Noid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's people are going to make jokes. Maybe he didn't take it that well. You know, he's seeing the music videos and cartoons, so he probably felt like everybody was like ganging up on him and stuff. But you know, when you're like having mental issues, stuff is not always what they seem, and you know, it just doesn't work out the way that you expect. So yeah, man, this video is by Mr. Ballen. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you swoop down the description box, comment on the link, and watch this video in its entirety, because I was pausing, stopping, and talking through the whole thing. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Zems, and welcome to the Crow's Nest. But yeah, man, let me know down in the comment section which video you guys want to see next. I know I seen Mr. Ballen. I seen the Nick Crowley. That's why I reacted to those two. And I think somebody told me something about Rotten Mango. But if you guys have any other suggestions, let me know down in the comment section. And then I'll go from there and then kind of see what you guys got going on. But again, thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys next time.